No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. Judge Frank Caprio had handled thousands of cases, speeding tickets, parking disputes, small-time violations, but the moment the defendant walked in, the room felt colder. It wasn't because of his expensive suit or the entitlement in his stride. It was because of the man sitting quietly in the back, clutching a worn backpack, trembling as if just being there hurt him. Something tied these two together, something buried, painful, and about to erupt. The defendant was Logan Westcott, 23 years old, the son of one of the wealthiest real estate magnates in the state. He wore a navy suit tailored to perfection, the kind that looked like it cost more than the annual income of most residents who passed through Judge Caprio's courtroom. His jawline sharp, his posture straight, he moved like a man convinced the universe bent in his favor. He was charged with disorderly conduct, verbal harassment, and property damage, but those words didn't tell the whole story, not even close. The courtroom murmured as the clerk announced the case. The story had already trickled through the city like wildfire. The billionaire's son who had mocked a homeless veteran outside a downtown cafe, knocking over his belongings and humiliating him in front of witnesses. Videos circulated online, grainy, shaky, but enough to spark outrage. And that veteran, he was here today, sitting in the back row, shoulders curled inward, eyes tired, haunted. Something was off, deeply off, like an emotional storm waiting to break open. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward slightly, studying both men, the arrogant young defendant and the fragile figure in the back row. At 80-something years old, he had learned that courtroom cases were often only the surface of deeper human wounds. The law dealt with facts, but life dealt with pain, trauma, and the moments that shaped people forever. He adjusted his glasses, his voice calm and steady. "Good morning. Let's take this one step at a time." He didn't rush. He never rushed. Inside, a familiar reflection stirred. Another young man at a crossroads, he thought. Another soul on the verge of being lost. Or saved. He had seen too many lives ruined by pride, neglect, trauma, and generational curses. But he had also seen people redeemed by grace, accountability, and a moment of truth. His eyes flicked again to the veteran. Something in the man's broken posture tugged at him. This was not going to be a typical hearing. Logan Westcott tried to look unfazed, but a small twitch in his jaw betrayed something. Anger? Nerves? Arrogance? Maybe all three. Judge Caprio gestured gently. "Mr. Westcott, you're charged with multiple counts. Before we proceed, I want to hear, briefly, your version of events." Logan exhaled sharply through his nose. "Your Honor, I didn't mean for things to go as far as they did. That man—" He pointed vaguely at the veteran without even turning to look. "He got in my way. He was blocking the sidewalk, and when I asked him to move, he said something rude." A wave of judgment rippled through the courtroom, but Judge Caprio simply nodded, letting him speak. "And," Logan continued, "I was frustrated. I had a rough day. I just reacted." His eyes flickered with something unspoken, shame or defensiveness, it was hard to tell. Judge Caprio looked up. "Reacted how?" Logan hesitated. He didn't answer. Instead, Judge Caprio turned his gaze toward the man in the audience. The veteran. His name was Daniel Rourke, age 58, U.S. Army Infantry, deployed twice overseas, honorably discharged. What the public didn't know, what the video didn't show, was the life he had been living since then. Daniel had been homeless for 7 years. 7 years of shelters, cold nights, and battles that never made headlines. 7 years of trying to outrun memories louder than gunfire. Logan didn't know that. Logan didn't care. But the court was about to. Judge Caprio addressed the veteran with quiet respect. "Mr. Rourke, would you be willing to speak?" Daniel's hands tightened around the frayed strap of his backpack. His voice was soft, strained, carrying the weight of unspoken war stories. If it's okay, Your Honor." "Of course," Judge Caprio said, nodding with genuine warmth. "Take your time." And Daniel began. Daniel stood slowly, like every movement cost him something. "I wasn't trying to bother anyone," he said. "I was just sitting there. I'd been up most of the night. Loud noises. They still get to me." His voice shook. Not with weakness, with memories. "I had my bag, my blanket, and some old photos with me. They're all I've got left." He swallowed hard. "This young man, he walked by laughing with his friends. One of them said I smelled. Another said I probably faked being a soldier." Gasps stirred across the room. Logan's face flushed red. Daniel continued. "I didn't say anything to them, not one word. I just sat there." Then his voice cracked. "Then he kicked my backpack. My photos spilled out. He stepped on one of them. One of my buddy." Silence. The kind that presses on your chest. Judge Caprio's eyes softened, but he did not interrupt. Daniel blinked rapidly, trying not to break. "I picked up the picture and I don't know. I said, 'Please don't.' But they laughed harder." Logan's jaw clenched. His eyes dropped. A crack in his armor. Daniel's voice grew faint. "I've had people ignore me. That's fine. But laughing while stepping on the memory of someone who died saving my life." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "That hurt, Your Honor. More than anything in years." The courtroom was motionless. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to quiet. Judge Caprio let the silence breathe. Let it settle. Let its weight touch every person present. Then he turned to Logan. "Is this accurate?" Logan didn't answer right away. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Something in Daniel's story had pierced through his practiced confidence. "Your Honor," Logan finally whispered. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know he was a veteran." Judge Caprio's voice remained steady. "Would it have made a difference?" A long pause. "Maybe," Logan admitted. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I just—" His voice broke unexpectedly. "I was angry that day. Not at him. At—" He trailed off, caught between pride and truth. Judge Caprio watched him carefully. Something deeper was unfolding. Something no one had expected. Logan closed his eyes. "My father had just told me I was a disappointment to him." A murmur spread. The billionaire's son. The golden child. The heir. A disappointment? The twist hung in the air. The courtroom leaned in. Judge Caprio's face softened with a quiet understanding. This case wasn't just about cruelty. It was about wounds on both sides. Wounds colliding in one terrible moment. Logan's confession hung in the room like a raw nerve exposed to cold air. The billionaire's son, the young man who strutted into the courtroom with entitlement sharper than his suit, now looked suddenly small. Not innocent, no, but fragile in a way that complicated everything. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but probing. "A disappointment?" Logan nodded stiffly, eyes still lowered. "My father doesn't see anything I do as good enough. He expects perfection. When I fall short, he makes sure I know it." There was no sympathy from the audience, only surprise. Logan's father was infamous for ruthless business tactics and pristine, choreographed public appearances. The world saw a titan of industry. His son saw a storm he could never outrun. But Judge Caprio was not swayed by wealth or tears. He focused on truth. "And so," he said quietly, "you pass that pain forward." Logan's voice cracked. "I guess I did." Daniel, the veteran, watched with a weary, complicated expression. He knew pain. He knew trauma. But cruelty was something he had struggled all his life not to become, despite every reason to collapse under its weight. He whispered under his breath, almost inaudible. "Hurt people hurt people." Judge Caprio turned gently toward Daniel again. "Mr. Rourke, I'd like you, only if you're comfortable, to tell us more about your situation. Not to justify anything, but so this court understands the full picture." Daniel nodded, though his eyes shimmered with apprehension. He took a slow breath. "I enlisted when I was 20. Didn't have money for college, and I wanted to make my mom proud." His voice carried a distant ache. "Served 8 years, 2 tours. I saw things I'll never unsee." He paused, chest rising and falling with controlled emotion. "When I came back, everything felt different. Noise bothered me, crowds bothered me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't hold a job for long." The courtroom remained silent. "My mom passed while I was deployed the second time. After that, I didn't have anyone else." He cleared his throat, steadying himself. "I tried to keep going, but some days, the memories, they hit harder than bullets ever did." Judge Caprio listened with profound respect. He saw this same story, in different forms, many times before. The soldiers who returned home with battles still raging inside them. Daniel continued softly. "That morning, before the incident, I'd had one of those nights. Couldn't sleep, shaking. I was just trying to gather myself." He swallowed. "And then, they came by." His voice trembled, remembering the laughter, the humiliation, the sharp sting of fresh disrespect layered on old scars. Judge Caprio's heart tightened. Empathy, not pity, because pity diminishes, empathy validates. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for your service, and for sharing this." A few people in the courtroom nodded, some with hands pressed to their chest. Daniel blinked rapidly, humbled by the acknowledgement. Judge Caprio turned back to Logan. "You said you reacted because you were angry. Tell me, what did you mean?" Logan shifted, uncomfortable, as though he'd been stripped of every protective layer. "My father told me that morning that he was cutting me off." A wave of shock swept through the courtroom. "Financially?" Judge Caprio asked calmly. "Yes. He said I was embarrassing him, that I hadn't done anything worthy of our family name, that I needed to prove my value or be nothing." Judge Caprio absorbed this thoughtfully. "And your response was to assert power over someone who had none." Logan winced. "I know how it sounds." "It doesn't sound," the judge replied softly. "It simply is." The audience murmured again, this time not in anger, but in contemplation. The gulf between these two men, one born into wealth, the other into war, was vast, and yet both were carrying wounds inflicted by forces larger than themselves. Still, pain did not excuse cruelty, and Judge Caprio understood that with clarity sharper than any gavel. For a moment, Judge Caprio remained quiet, allowing the weight of the stories to settle. Inside, he reflected with the wisdom of decades spent balancing justice and compassion. Two different battles, he thought. One internal, one external. Both neglected. He'd seen young men like Logan, lost, angry, desperate for validation, raised in the shadow of fathers who offered wealth but not love. He'd seen veterans like Daniel, broken by war, then broken again by society that forgot its promises. He felt the responsibility settle on his shoulders like a familiar cloak. The law must be upheld, he told himself. But the law must never forget the people it serves. He breathed in slowly before speaking. "Mr. Westcott," he began, "do you understand the severity of what you did?" Logan nodded, shame burning behind his eyes. "I do now, Your Honor. You humiliated a man who protected this country. You damaged his property, mocked his trauma, and turned a moment of suffering into a spectacle. That is not simply a mistake. That is cruelty." Logan's eyes glistened, but Judge Caprio's voice softened, not excusing, but understanding. "Tell me something. When you stepped on that photograph, did you know what it represented?" Logan shook his head. "No, Your Honor. I didn't even look. I just reacted." Daniel's jaw tightened. Memories of his fallen friend flashed behind his eyes. Judge Caprio looked from one man to the other, letting the gravity of the damage hang in the air. Then he spoke with calm authority. "Both of you have been carrying pain, but only one of you used it against someone else." Logan's breath hitched. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am." He turned slightly toward Daniel. "I'm very sorry." Daniel gazed at him, not with forgiveness yet, but with the cautious eyes of a man who had been hurt too many times. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. "Mr. Rourke, would you allow me to ask something sensitive?" Daniel nodded. "Have you received support, counseling, any kind of therapy for what you've experienced?" Daniel looked down. "No, Your Honor, I never felt deserving of it." Logan's head snapped up, not in judgment, but in disbelief. Judge Caprio inhaled slowly, pain flickering in his eyes. "War does not end when the soldier comes home." Daniel's lips trembled. "I know. And no one," Judge Caprio continued softly, "should walk that road alone." The courtroom felt smaller suddenly, like a confessional, a sanctuary, a place where the weight of human suffering could finally be acknowledged. Logan watched Daniel, a growing heaviness settling inside him. For the first time, he truly looked at the man he had mocked, not as an obstacle, not as a target, but as a human being. Then, unexpectedly, Logan spoke again, voice trembling. "Your Honor, I wasn't just angry at my dad. I was angry at myself." Judge Caprio raised an eyebrow. Logan swallowed hard. "I've never done anything meaningful in my life, never earned anything, never helped anyone. I was raised to win, not to understand people." A hush fell over the room. Seeing him there, Logan gestured weakly toward Daniel. "I don't know why, but it made me feel powerless, like I couldn't control anything. So I lashed out, at the wrong person, in the worst way." Tears brimmed. "I'm not proud of it. I hate that I did it." Daniel stared at him, expression unreadable. This was not absolution, but it was honesty. And honesty was the first crack through which redemption might seep. Judge Caprio glanced at the clerk. "Is the witness present?" A young woman in her 20s stood up, the cafe worker who had captured part of the incident on her phone. She walked forward with hesitant steps. Judge Caprio nodded warmly. "Please tell us what you observed. Only facts." She took a breath. "I saw the whole thing, Your Honor. I was taking trash out behind the cafe when I heard laughing." Her eyes flicked between Logan and Daniel. Logan's friends were egging him on. They were calling Mr. Rourke names, but she hesitated. What surprised me was how fast Logan went quiet after he stepped on the photo. His friends were still laughing, but he just froze, like he realized what he did and didn't know how to undo it. Logan blinked, stunned that someone had noticed. She continued. "He walked away after that. The others kept mocking Mr. Rourke until I yelled at them. I think Logan felt guilty even then." Judge Caprio absorbed her testimony carefully. The tension in the room shifted again. Not to absolve Logan, but to paint the fuller picture. Logan wasn't a monster. He was a wounded young man who had caused real harm. And now he stood face to face with the consequences. The courtroom had shifted from hostility to emotional gravity. Every person in the chamber felt the weight of the moment, not just a legal hearing, but a collision of two broken human beings standing on opposite ends of society's spectrum. Judge Caprio folded his hands and looked first at Logan, then at Daniel. "This case isn't simple," he began. "It never was." He leaned back, thoughtful. "We have a young man who acted cruelly. There's no ambiguity there." Logan lowered his head. "We also have a veteran who has suffered more than most people can comprehend, and who deserved nothing but respect and dignity." Daniel nodded faintly, though his eyes were gentle, not vengeful. "But we also have," Judge Caprio continued, "two individuals who are both fighting battles, one internal, one external. One man was broken by war, the other by expectations and neglect." He paused, letting that sink in. "This courtroom isn't here to destroy either of you. It's here to correct, to heal, if possible." A tremor of emotion moved through the audience. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. "Mr. Westcott, stand up." Logan rose slowly. "Your actions require accountability. There is no world in which your behavior can be excused. But the form of that accountability, that is where this court has discretion." Logan braced himself. A fine? Community service? Jail time? But Judge Caprio had something else in mind. He turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Rourke, you've endured humiliation, suffering, and emotional pain. You also said something quietly earlier, something many might have missed." Daniel looked up, unsure. Judge Caprio smiled softly. "You said, 'Hurt people hurt people.'" A flicker of surprise warmed Daniel's tired face. "That was a profound truth," Judge Caprio said, "and it shows you carry more wisdom than most people who sit in this courtroom." Daniel straightened slightly, humbled by the acknowledgement. Then Judge Caprio turned again to Logan. "Mr. Westcott, I believe that the greatest punishment, and perhaps the greatest opportunity for growth, is not in fines or jail time." Logan's eyes widened. "I am sentencing you," Judge Caprio said calmly, "to serve 3 months, daily, with the Veteran Outreach Center here in Providence." Gasps echoed. "You will work with homeless veterans. You will hear their stories. You will understand their struggles, and you will contribute meaningfully to their care." Logan blinked, stunned. This was not a slap on the wrist. This was an immersion into a world he had never acknowledged. "Additionally," Judge Caprio added, "you will pay for safe temporary housing for Mr. Rourke for the next 90 days. Daniel's mouth parted in shock. Logan swallowed hard. "And," Judge Caprio finished, "you will replace every item of Mr. Rourke's that you damaged, including restoring or framing the photograph you stepped on." The courtroom fell silent. The sentence wasn't cruel. It wasn't vindictive. It was transformative. Exactly what Judge Caprio was known for. For a long moment, Daniel simply stared at Judge Caprio, overwhelmed. Then he stood up. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Judge Caprio nodded. Daniel turned, not to the judge but to Logan. His voice was steady, though his eyes glistened. "Son, what you did hurt me. It really did." Logan's lips trembled. "But I've seen men do worse in war because they were broken inside. I can see you're not evil, just lost." Logan's chin quivered. "If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to let this go. Not forget it, but let it be a start." The room exhaled as if a collective tension finally released. Logan's breath broke. A tear slid down his cheek. "I want to learn," he whispered. "I really do." Daniel stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, then extended his hand. Logan stared at it like it was a lifeline. Then he took it. The handshake was brief, shaky, but real. A bridge built from pain, humility, and possibility. Judge Caprio watched the moment unfold, his heart swelling with a familiar blend of pride and gravity. This is what justice is meant to do, he thought. Not simply punish, but transform, restore, uplift. He had presided over countless cases. But this one struck a chord, not because of the status of the defendant or even the tragedy of the victim, but because he witnessed something rare: 2 broken men choosing humanity over bitterness. These were the moments that reminded him why he continued sitting on the bench long after many of his colleagues retired. Pain only multiplies when left in the dark, he reflected. But in the open, in conversation, in understanding, It can become something else, something healing. He smiled gently, then raised his gavel. Judge Caprio addressed the courtroom formally. The sentence stands. He looked at Daniel. Mr. Rourke, this court thanks you again for your service and your dignity in the face of pain. Daniel nodded, eyes misty. Then Judge Caprio looked at Logan. Mr. Westcott, you have been given an opportunity that many young men never receive to truly understand the world beyond your privilege. Logan absorbed every word. Do not waste it, Judge Caprio warned, though his tone remained nurturing. Because life will not always offer second chances. Today, you are receiving one because someone you hurt chose compassion when you did not. Logan nodded, tears streaking down his face. I won't waste it, Your Honor. Judge Caprio raised the gavel. Case dismissed. The sound echoed like the closing of a chapter and the beginning of another. 3 months passed. The story went viral. News outlets across the country covered the case. Billionaire's son forced to work with veterans after mocking homeless soldier. Judge Caprio's powerful sentence changes young man's life. Nation applauds unprecedented, compassionate ruling. But the real story happened quietly, away from cameras. Logan showed up at the Veteran Outreach Center every day. At first, he was awkward, unsure, unsteady around men whose experiences dwarfed anything he had gone through. But slowly. He listened. He learned. He helped distribute meals. He sat with veterans who cried through stories they had buried for decades. He cleaned rooms, organized supplies, helped with intake forms, and, most importantly, he changed. Daniel checked in on him once a week. What began as cautious supervision became unlikely friendship. Daniel told him about war. Logan told him about the wars fought inside wealthy mansions. Both understood pain differently, but both recognized it intimately. When Logan returned the restored photograph, framed beautifully, cleaned, honored, Daniel wept openly. You didn't just fix the photo, Daniel said. You fixed the moment. Logan had no words, just gratitude. Back in his chambers months later, Judge Caprio received a letter. It was handwritten, shaky, but deliberate. Your Honor, thank you for giving me back a reason to hope. Daniel Rourke. Attached was another note, this one from Logan. Judge Caprio, thank you for not giving up on me. I want to live a life worthy of that second chance. Judge Caprio closed the letters gently. A soft smile touched his face. Justice had been served. But more importantly, humanity had been restored. And in the quiet of his empty courtroom, he whispered the truth he had learned over a lifetime. The law can correct a mistake, but compassion can change a life.